welcome everyone. I am. Oops, I realized. Hey, Adriano, how's it going? Long time. Long time. So we're doing some dedicated testing tonight against lands. For those who haven't really followed the initiative metagame, lands was in a really tough spot before the banning of, or actually, oh, congratulations, Adriano. I'm very happy for you. Let me know how that goes. I don't really follow the, I guess the Pro Tour or slash Worlds scene too much, but yeah, I'd love to know how you do and how your prep is going for that. Very happy for you for sure. For those who don't know, Adriano is one of the best for sure modern players I know. I think but besides being one of the best modern players I know, he's also good in every format. Um, like he qualified for the showcase qualifier in Legacy. I think he's like won I think a Pioneer challenge before. So just off the top of my head, I think those are some of Adriano's accolades. Not to mention a an elf slash Phenar's an enthusiast as well. Let me see if Tim is ready. But yeah, we're doing some dedicated testing against lands, and Tim Schulz is probably one of the best lands players around. Um, he also recently qualified for last, not last season, but the last season of 2022, because we're technically in still season one of 2023. But he qualified for the showcase then, winning the showcase challenge actually. So lit. So the way the format is gonna work tonight, I think Legacy is all over the place, Adriano. Like, I kind of predicted, and so far I've been like half right, I guess. I predicted that people would be playing their pet decks. That seems to be pretty accurate so far. I also predicted people would be brewing a lot. That is also accurate so far. What I was wrong about was I thought Delver would still be like the most played deck, and I think in the most recent challenge, and it was not. I think it was Reanimator, ironically enough. But I thought people would still be playing Delver. I think maybe Saturday was, but I'd have to look at the numbers. Inigo probably has a better idea than I do. But at least Sunday, I heard it was not the most played deck. And I definitely thought Delver would be. Maybe just people haven't settled on a version they like. I still think the deck is very good, but maybe people would want to play something, want to net deck something that is a known commodity instead of, brewing with Delver, so to speak. All right. With that said, I'll go. Tim is ready. I'll go ahead and challenge him. Uh, and let's see, just for fun, I think that's correct. We're gonna talk more about the legacy format. Tim's gonna come on after two matches. So the way we're doing it tonight is we're gonna play two matches, lands versus I guess Cradle, right? And then after those two matches, we're gonna discuss how they went, and then maybe play a third one with if it goes poorly for me, for instance. We're not favored for sure, but all right. Looks like we're along the die road. That helps. And uh, I guess if I saw Tim on the other side, I would assume he's on lands, but like I think you have to keep kind of most hands with this deck. Um, Fortunately, this is not a particularly great hand against him. It has turn one ramp. I think we'll just keep it. This is kind of a blank, but we have three lands. I don't really want to mull, I think. If we do have good top decks. There is a showcase. I think if you're playing Adriano and you don't know what to play, I think some good options are. I think you'll probably pilot Reanimator better than most players. I think they have like a 40% win rate, but I think a lot of it is just inexperienced pilots. I think that's probably a good call. I think, but the problem is there might be a lot of hate right now, but it's hard to say. People are all over the place. I think the red green initiative deck is probably something that could be up your alley, Adriano. I think that like plays to some of your strengths, for instance. I think elves or a cradle is a good option too. All right, let's see. What am we drawing here? A blank and does stuff. I guess. I guess we just take the Fiend Artisan. A little bit awkward having to lean with the layer here. What else is good? Um, yeah, I think I like. How are people usually adapting Delver? I haven't actually played against it yet, so that's the weird thing, right? No, I think Sprite Dragon's bad. The new Arcanus is okay. The problem with that card, in my opinion, is it's a little bit slow. So, well, sort of. Not really punished, but a little bit punished, I guess. They loam here. Yeah, I'm assuming you're talking about the Mercurial Spelldancer. It is, in my opinion, not Arcanus. Not even close. I've won with it hitting me. Actually, two streams ago, I think it was, or one stream ago, I beat Grixis uh, Control where it hit me 5 times. So, for whatever that's worth. Mm. No. We're playing Tim in a practice match, and all right, what are we gonna do here? The problem is that Wasteland is up. No, the Wasteland is a problem, really. Mm, I think we just play this and pass. We can attack, I guess, for 2. Yeah, yeah. I think it's good to be proactive right now. People are playing these very dirtily shells that I don't think are very good, but it is what it is. What I mean by that is like there are a lot of these like bat decks, and I personally am not convinced by any of them being good. Like I think, for instance, a lot of these natural order shells too. I think they are, for lack of a better term, worse versions of our deck because their removal costs 1 mana when ours costs 0, and I think the cantrips slow them down and hurt the mana base. Um, Here we can't. Well, actually, it would have been 4. Yeah, we were short Atraxa math. Hmm. Actually, they might just get needle. Okay, that's dumb by me. I should not have done that. Essentially, I'm just ramping here, and then if they want to needle, they can. I don't remember if Tim plays needle. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think I'm gonna have to get the Cradle regardless because I gotta draw out the Wasteland, so to speak. If this gets needled, if this gets wasted, it gets wasted. I don't think we're allowed to play around that. Might be naming a Reclaimer or Artisan, but we'll see. Like we have to force the wasteland out, so to speak. It's awkward. Okay, there's the needle. Probably on Artisan. We gotta hold the cradle in hand. Um, yeah, that's heads up. In a lot of ways, Fiend Artisan is now the. I don't think it's the strongest creature in the deck. I think that's still Reclaimer, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, oh, that's really awkward. I might have misplayed there. Maybe I'm supposed to let Tim needle us. Yeah, it's possible. We're supposed to let Tim needle us and then shield against Wasteland there, right? Sorry, have Bog up, so to speak, right? I don't think it necessarily matters. I think we have to deal with the loam at some point. This is the first match. That's correct. First game of first match. We're gonna play this 3 times. Two first, and then I think we're just gonna go ahead and do this and deal with the loam. I think we can attack for 5 here. Oh my god, maybe a bog? Oh, was not expecting that, but that's pretty good. Mm, I think here we just play on the cradle. Tim is very good for what it's worth, Joffin away. They arguably the best lands player right now. I think it's like between him, Ali, and like Jarvis. Like that's my top 3, I guess, of lands players. It's kind of lucky. What are the odds he has another? Oops. I think we pitched the reclaimer here. We're gonna get Atraxa. I don't want to lose to rotation, so to speak, right? I get the snuff out. Green Sun, I think. The Artisan and the land. Oops, I can't do anything yet. I could have attacked for 2. Couldn't we have played both the second reclaim and the Grinch this turn? I think that's possible. I didn't think about it through. I changed my mind. Like I should have probably thought about it better, Josh. So you're not wrong. Also possible I'm supposed to attack for 2 there. Don't know if it changes anything. I was playing around the second crop there. Like I think we get blown out if we go for hoof and they don't have it, and they have the crop rotation for maize, for instance. I think here we're gonna green sun for two. Oops. I don't think Grist actually in this matchup doesn't really do much. Where's the collective? I think here we just play that. I think. It couldn't matter. It's a two-turn clock. I'm not playing very well, to be honest here. Um, if I'm trying to be fair, but it could happen that our hand just lined up well. Like I'm not playing particularly well. Tim hasn't conceded yet. I wonder if that's like a glacial chasm or a Caracas. In case it's both, we're just gonna attack all. So let's just do that, and then attack with everything. It might be a glacial chasm. All right. In this case, I will go ahead and play the Grayson tick up. I think we're in a good spot. With the collective doing work here. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I played particularly well, but I think from a micro perspective, I don't think I played from a macro. I think our game plan was good though, if that makes sense. So I think I got the big picture right. Definitely need to tighten up after the kind of shaky, to be honest, gameplay. I think we definitely don't want the snuff outs here. They don't really have any targets. I don't actually think Grist again is like good in this matchup. We boarded the graveyard hate. I think agent is like really good. I think we'll see how the cling to dust works. Um, that I kind of brought up in my Discord. Alistair Shepard, basically no text in this matchup. Anything else here worth keeping in? Probably not. Like I think discard is not where we want to be in this kind of matchup. Um, no, I don't think we want removal. Engineer, I don't think really does anything either. Gris like has text, but I think if Gris is good, you are probably in a good spot, if that makes sense. Their sideboarding, I would guess Tim probably keeps in the Caracas because it can hold off a Traxa, for instance, or bounce. Conveniently enough, we can actually hard cast a Traxa under the right board state. That I'm not sure I understand the point of cling over surgical. The point is, Josh, I needed another card that can come in against Delver. I don't want surgical against Delver. I think cling is like reasonable. That slot needs to be a card that can come in against a lot of decks, and I think that's the logic behind that. Whether that's flawed logic or not is a different story. But I had been playing one Witherbloom command, and I think it was. Do I want this? Probably actually. It's got multiple graveyard hate. It loses to Merit Lage, but I think we lose to Merit Lage regardless. Okay, there's the Caracas. Exploration definitely one of the harder starts for us. We're gonna fetch the Thin into Once Upon a Time. Save the second Endurance as pitch for. Clean doesn't sound great against Delver. It's not, and I think there's argument to be made. If I just want a card that can just like come in and not be great, I think we want the Reclaimer. Um, okay. Oh, first thing on Cling, I guess. Like it can be a combat. It's mostly to cantrip slash take delirium off. That's like the main part. Like drawing a card, I think is like relevant. It's not great for sure. I can see that. But the alternative maybe is to play one Fairy Macabre as a combat trick, which seems kind of loose to me, honestly, as well. I think here we want the Collective, and then I'm gonna play the Reclaimer. Uh, in general, you won't don't want to expose your Cradle in this matchup. There's like so many ways to lose it, and my opinion, it's while we did win without Cradle, it is almost impossible. Like typically against some of their hands. All right, if it's a Merit Lage, we're in trouble. Well, the Collective is making me look like a genius here. Although really, oh, that's awkward for them. Typically speaking, you don't want to draw the Glacial Chasm. I think here it's worth it. Because we're gonna bog next turn. Yeah, there is that part too, right? We definitely bog. Uh, the question here is like, do we expose the Cradle or not? I think in the event they Tabernacle, maybe we're supposed to. Actually, no, no, we definitely need a bog. What am I saying? And then we'll play the Fiend Artisan. And then pass. It's definitely really awkward here if they Tabernacle us. Or Waste plus Tabernacle, right? I guess in that event, I probably had to let the Reclaimer or whatever die. They're cut off green from what I see. The ley line's a little bit late. I think we do this, and I think three. We can technically get Atraxa, although it just draws us. They have the Caracas. I don't. I think we just shut them off out and get an what's it called, an agent. Arguments to be made. We got Atraxa there, but I don't love it given that they have a Caracas on the other side. Sure. I don't think. In case we draw another one, we can just play a ley line, right, to be safe. Technically, actually, technically speaking, we can just get a fetch and then fetch into Bayou. Sure, that works. Maybe I'm supposed to keep Reclaimer. I didn't think about that, but that's maybe I'm supposed to keep. Do I care if they loam? Maybe not, right? Yeah, I think we play the ley line. And then we just like play our hand, right? All right. That one again. I am not sure I made all the right plays, but I think from a high level perspective, I think it was probably okay. We can run it back. Let me just make sure. All right, we're gonna play two in a row, and then we're gonna talk about it afterwards. Oops. All right, so Tim said he's gonna try a little bit harder. He went a little bit easy on me, maybe over calibrated, right? This matchup, like I said, historically speaking, a little bit difficult for elves. Oh wow, that's pretty nuts, Josh. Thanks for that heads up. For those who don't know, Josh is like my baseball insider person that I trust. Of course, he's a Giants fan, but that's okay. We won't hold that against him. I think we keep this in the dark. And overall, it's like okay. It has natural order. I mean, that is a card. I think, given that they're on lands, we just want to hit land drops, right? Like I'm like definitely scared of just looking like getting locked out by them. I think here we take the forest. Well, actually, I like the fetch because it grows reclaimer. Like little things like that could matter. Although arguments we made, we have like two moles here, right? Like the Atrax is bad, and then the Shepherd's not so great. Our hand this game is oh, all right. These are the hard games against Lance, where they have Tabernacle. So I've actually had Lance players against me uh, just like turn one Tabernacle and they like pause because I think they're expecting me to concede. Um, so I know it must frustrate some other Elf players because if they're expecting me to concede just based on turn one Tabernacle, that kind of tells me that that strategy typically works for our lands opponent, right? I think we're dead here to Merit Lage. All right. Oh wow, that's okay. We are dead. I'll concede. I don't want to waste anybody's time, especially Tim, who's nice enough to do this with me. We'll take out the snuff outs, and we're gonna board the same way. Layla, the Graveyard Hate comes in. Guy's Blessing, like I know a lot of people make fun of this card, like oh, this is like your secret tech against Painter only. It's actually more flexible than people realize. Like low key, I bring it against Delver, I bring it against like lands, I bring it against Reanimator. Against Reanimator, like usually what happens is like it can only hit if they faithless looting, or it can hit their flashback phase faithless looting. But I found it's like serviceable, if that makes sense. I think the rest is fine. Like a lot better than it looks against other matches. It's not strictly just for Painter. Although Painter is the reason to play the card, obviously. What is it? Parker, Shadow aficionado. I saw him post that the elf community was like super ahead on the guy's blessing because they kind of compared it to like us being on that compared to them being on snuff outs. Definitely the ninjas and the shadow community were the first ones to adopt at least some number of snuff outs. I think three was the most I saw. I think we were the first to play four in any lists, and then definitely the first four to place four in the main deck. But I like to joke they huff so we can snuff. Oof, I don't love it, but it has like two pieces of hate, so we'll keep. I don't love this hand though. I'm just keeping it because of the Leyland. If they like Mirror Ages, I think we just like live with it. Uh, Like it's a little bit sketch for sure. Sometimes I keep hands with Leyline. I shouldn't. Actually, I should not have done that. I should have just cycled the blessing, but now kind of priced into it. I'll misplay on my behalf. This is just a cycle. I don't think he would board enforce a vigor against me, but I mean I could be wrong. But the reason why this is a misplay is because I don't have a creature now, like for the natural order. Tim's like, now you're just teasing, talking about the double pieces of graveyard hate, right? Torpor orb. Okay, that's pretty good against us. It's just off natural order, right? Like it's awkward because both targets. All right. Now we do have a creature. Just all the graveyard hate here, apparently. All right. This game is definitely a strange game. I think our line here is like agent. We ideally draw a one drop though. This is what I mean by we're getting punished for our for I played the land too quickly. I should have played the force. Now we have to rely on a one drop, and we didn't draw it, unfortunately. They're probably gonna crack the expedition map in response. No, I guess not. But here really punished because otherwise we would have been able to play the cradle and then granted we may not have drawn the artisan, but we can't get the agent right like to shut off the saga, and then their constructs are gonna get really big. Wow. Mercy Rule is kind of crazy. Um, that's pretty sick for sure, Josh. We'll see how this goes. We are on somewhat of a fast clock. They are tapped out. The problem is we go for our tracks that is like could end disastrously. I think we take 10 here if if it comes down to it, and then hopefully the natural order for actually a hook doesn't even work. So what am I saying? Because of the torpor orb. Yeah. So that was a mistake on my behalf. A mistake on my behalf. Now we have to block awkwardly. I think here we just pitch that. Yeah. Again, if Tim has the Caracas, we lose, right? All right. I think we are dead. I think we are dead. So we have the double block now. So I'll just concede. We're not winning this game. Uh, I want to bring Tim on now, and then we'll discuss the match or the what we think. Let me close this. I'm gonna message him on Discord, and then we'll discuss this.
Hello.
Hey Tim, how's it going?
It's going great. Two very divisive games or matches, I guess. That was
Yeah, that was pretty wild. Honestly, I did not expect us to. I thought we could win maybe one of the two matches, but like I didn't think it was gonna be you know I thought it was gonna be like more grindy if that makes sense, or like we had to like cheese a wins. I guess I kind of did with the that collector oof.
Collector Oof was good. That first game felt okay. I don't. There was one spot where I had the ability to crop rot for Tabernacle when you
Mhm.
just had Hierarch and Elvish Reclaimer out, and I didn't think I needed to because if I hit another land, I was close to, and I should have.
Were you holding it because for Merit Lage or what?
Yeah, potential Tabernacle, or if I hit another land for another Saga to, push some more through. I just thought that I could get ahead, and I did not draw out. But
Mhm.
game one, I had a 7 land into a 1 land, and so I mulled to 5, and the mull to 5 felt good.
Mhm.
And then in the first post sideboard game, I got completely destroyed with your graveyard hate. That was very well done, cutting me
Yeah.
off of green, and then continuing to just hold that over my head. That was perfect. I had another loam. I don't know that I even got to cast because it was just not coming.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I think I was a little bit fortunate. I had the so I mentioned this in the stream. You can watch it after the fact. Actually, let's do a quick introduction for those who don't know. I'm on the phone or Discord right now with Tim Schulz. Schulz Cubed on what's it called. This is your list, by the way, but I'm gonna bring up your social media real quick. This is Tim's social. Let me copy links. Are you? Can you see my screen right now? By the way, on Twitch, or actually, should I just share it with you on so it's quicker on Discord?
Yeah, that would be fine. I didn't open Twitch just because I wanted to, integrity and whatever else. But
Oh no, yeah, no, I feel you on that. Let me share it on Discord so you can see my screen. That would be easier.
yeah, hey, that's me.
So yeah, for those who don't know, I mentioned this kind of at the beginning of my stream that you're probably at least a top three Lance player in the world. Like I have you up there with like Jarvis and like Ali, right? And then I mentioned that you won the showcase challenge back at the end of 2022 with Lance and somebody that I communicated on and off with regarding green decks in general, right? But yeah, I think so. One of the things is I guess what we could do. Like, do you want to plug anything real quick before we talk a little bit deeper?
Nope, I have nothing to plug. I am, as you said, lands advocate. I love lands. I got to play lands the showcase before they didn't ban initiative, and I mean it was just great. So I'm happy to see it back. I played a legacy is good. I love when they ban stuff that needed to go. So this feels real great.
All right, so here is the list from that event. I did compare the list, but I'm assuming it's pretty close to what you played today. Um, the big thing is I noticed the blast zone in the sideboard. I mean, in the mana base, which is pretty cool. Luckily, I'm not on too many one drops, so that's not too bad. But uh, overall, like I guess here's the list I played. I apologize for not sharing it ahead of time. I meant to, and then I was like running late from dinner, and then we just got started. But the main deck is, I think I told you, like it's not really built for the lands matchup. As you can see, like I four snuffouts are like pretty dead, and then the shepherds are kind of dead too, right? Like, and so the Grizz is kind of bad too.
Okay. Snuff out being dead, I 100% agree with. Grist scares me.
Oh, does it? Interesting. What
Yeah.
can you elaborate? I guess a little bit on that.
So Grist shuts down my constructs
Mm-hmm.
unless I've got the ability to go construct into Shadowsphere,
Mm-hmm.
and then Grist for Fiend Artisan fodder is pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Grist closes out games that I can somewhat stabilize for. So I'm glad I didn't see a Grist, but I don't know if you keep those in. For me, Grist is a really wide board that enables it makes me have to keep my shields up. So
Gotcha.
when I play against elves, I know that some of the other lands players aren't as big on Glacial Chasm as I am, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I play a more cautious, more safe game, that's
Hmm.
probably lost me a number of rounds. But having Glacial Chasm and keeping the crop rod up for Glacial Chasm is
Hmm.
something I have to do if you've got 3 insects, because I'm assuming I've already taken some chip damage, and then Crater Hoof becomes lethal.
Interesting. Okay, so I think that is like reasonable, and I think I can see a scenario where I like it better than for sure, like maybe the Allosaurus Shepherd, or do you think the Shepherd is, being a one drop is more relevant than like Gris? My logic, I guess before you while you ponder on that, is I wasn't so sure about Gris being good in the matchup only because I expect the Tabernacle I expect to be under pressure from the mana denial plan. I don't know if your latest list, I'll bring back up, if you're running Rashad Port, but
I am not.
okay, so like I don't even think it's great to be honest, but like some people have that. Uh, but yeah, it looks like the other Tim here in the chat also agrees Gris is scary. So it is that just flawed logic because of potential of Tabernacle that maybe I should be keeping in maybe the Gris over like an Allosaurus Shepherd that I think is also kind of bad.
I would say yes on that.
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of the constructs and the fodder aspect is seems great. I think that you have the ability with your reclaimer package to more reliably get out the Gaia's cradles, and
Mm-hmm.
having Gaia's cradle reliability like that makes me a little bit more cautious to wasteland the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you've got it out, I might not even. I think in round one I pithing needled Fiend Artisan over Reclaimer because I didn't respect it enough, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well I can beat the Reclaimer because I've got 2 wastelands, and I wastelanded twice,
Mm-hmm.
and then you ended me, and I was like, oh, that was.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised. I mentioned this too. Like, I think maybe I share this in common with you. I play the matchup kind of conservatively too. I don't just like run out Kratos because I just expect them to be blown up. So I mentioned also during that first match where you did waste me twice. That I'm gonna have to essentially a lot of these wasteland matchups. I just force the issue if that makes sense. So like as long as I continue hitting land drops, I can continue to rotate for Kratos, and I just have to hope that you run out if that makes sense. Like at some point, hopefully the wastelands, not the wasteland, the cradle will stick after enough wastelands, and then I can unlock my game plan if that makes sense.
Yes, and you definitely did that. I think I probably could have held back and not gotten rid of the second Dryad Arbor,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I was excited. I didn't respect it, and you played. That was a demonstration of being outplayed. So
No, no,
thank
no.
you for
I
doing that
definitely
on
made some
stream.
small micro errors too. I think from a macro standpoint, I was okay with how I played the two matches. The second game of the second match. Sorry, I apologize. I have somebody at the door. I want to put you on hold real quick. Is that sorry about that?
Yeah, no, not a problem.
Yes. Nope. This is the grills are no longer here. I'm homeowner.
So if I'm still live to chat, the only difference between this list and the list I played today is I've cut one Punishing Fire for a main deck Haywire Might,
Yes.
and I cut one Force of Vigor
Yeah,
for
yeah.
a Torpor Orb. And then the list I'm playing is identical to this with the exception of those 2 cards.
Uh-huh. 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 Okay. I'm good. Thank you, though. Thank you. I apologize, Tim. Sorry, like I said, I
No,
had to
no worries.
answer. Somebody rang the doorbell.
Not a problem.
Okay, where were we?
You were just walking through lines on there were some macro plays and then
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think one thing that definitely came up that I noticed was okay. So first of all, like, so you think you agree the Shepherds are pretty bad, right? Like, it's a one man and 1-1 in my opinion in the matchup.
correct. I might keep one in, but that would be where I would start to shave for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Here,
Uh,
actually for reference, I'll show you how I boarded. Um, like I think I kept a loose game two hand against you in the second match, but over from a macro perspective, I think I played okay. Some of the micro stuff I think I could have cleaned up, but luckily it didn't cost me in the first match. That's what I boarded in, and then here's what I boarded out. The snuff outs are awful, and I think I did this. Oops. So 8 and 8, yeah, and I think if that's the case, I can keep in, one grist per se, or do you like both?
I don't know that you need both. Having the toolbox with Once Upon a Time
Mm-hmm.
cradles, and I think that you can get through with one because going, I guess you don't have as many. I don't as many. You've got enough. That's fine. Yeah, because if you hit grist on turn two, and I don't have any other acceleration, it forces me to either bring the tabernacle out to keep grist in check, and
Mm-hmm.
that normally comes at a pretty high cost. So grist into no uh, exploration is something that I would value. So that looks good.
So from the chat, the other Tim is the Tim on the Twitch chat mentioned that they would, you know, keep the second grist over the guy's blessing. Any thoughts on that? This is
I feel
obviously is like something I'm testing tonight. It's like literally the first, not the first, but like the first time I touched this card in a while.
I like Cling to Dust. I think that is a great card over Gaia's Blessing.
Uh huh.
Gaia's Blessing. I don't know that the draw card is a relevant card mode, and if it's after the first dredge,
Mm-hmm.
then I
Probably
don't
doesn't
think
matter, right?
it's as powerful. But with four endurance, Gaia's Blessing might be situational.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's enough going on in my deck against Graveyard Hate that I'm not sold. That might be too much.
That makes sense. That is like one of the issues I've found with like people ask me, "Oh yeah, aren't you scared of Reanimator? Like, don't you want four endurance, four Leyline?" I said, "Not really, because I know this is somewhat of a tangent. Like, the hands that I'm most afraid of out of Reanimator is actually the show and tell hands that just bypass the graveyard hit. So that's kind of why I think I agree with you that like there's such a thing as too much graveyard hate. But yeah, I can see, maybe not doing that and keeping like a grist in, just for like more presence, just like in the event that I can, stress cradles enough, it's just more, sorry, stress wastelands enough, the cradle get powered up, right, by the grist.
So Atrax is a card that I've not been terribly afraid of.
Uh huh.
Between the one of Torpor Orb and Caracas,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't typically connect. The way that you've got it set up, how have you been finding Atraxa?
In this particular matchup.
Yeah.
So the torpor orb, I think I saw your image before it. I said, oh, that's gonna be real interesting if he draws that against me because it's gonna shut off essentially the entire natural order package, which did happen in that second match. And then I'll be honest, that was I think only the first and second time I've resolved an attract. Well, actually, that's not true. I think one other match against Lance, I got her and she was good there. but I think that was a game I was already winning. And then in the two games we played, she drew I think into the Fiend Artisan or whatever. But I think I was kind of ahead in that game too, right? Of the first match, and then obviously it was a desperation, just try to like block constructs, and then you had the crop rotation for the Caracas there. So I knew that was a Hail Mary and it didn't work out, but I think um, this is like one of the few matchups where I think Progenitus is better than Atraxa.
Yes, and I don't know that it needs to go main or needs to be brought back, but
Mm-hmm.
I Progenitus is scary and requires me to either loop from the graveyard on my chasm
Mm-hmm.
or stall for just a few turns. And Atraxa I can handle most easily. When Reanimator hits Atraxa instead of Crystal Brand, I am thrilled. And right now, the four color no Atraxa or natural order Atraxa decks, it's not crazy. I mean, I don't. I'm just not impressed by it right now, and it'll wind up being exploited, broken, and banned in a couple of months. But right now, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
not getting the read that it's
I think
as
it's also
powerful.
a specific to your deck, to be fair as well, where because you have the long grindy tools, like you're not necessarily losing to attracts a dig through time, right, so to speak. Um, and I think it did help me in the first game that I resolved. I think I drew a Fiend Artisan, and then but that may you can I don't remember exactly how that played out, but that might have been a game I may have won anyways. Um, but definitely it was not good that second game I had where you just bounced it, so to speak, right?
Yeah, that first game when you hit the guys or the Fiend Artisan, Green Sun Zenith, Snuff Out, and a land,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually played into the Green Sun for Collector Roof because I imagined that you had Green Sun for Fiend Artisan. I was like, okay, so you got another Fiend Artisan, and then you Green Sun again, and I think it was the one you drew off of it. So here I am talking trash on it, but I think that was actually a very powerful line because it even snuff out my solo construct.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was fully expecting for you to actually activate your expedition map, and that makes sense that you were thinking that I was getting the Fiend Artisan because I was just thinking, oh, maybe you just didn't care, right? Or like you just had something else that was. Thank you for the Fallout Dirt, the base lad. But I was thinking, oh, maybe you value the extra construct more. It ended up working, I guess, out for me that first match, but then that might have been just more fluky than anything else. But I do think, yeah, Atraxa against lands in particular, so there is one hole, right? Like in the Twitch chat, I don't think you can see it, but is the Tim actually mentioned that, and I kind of mentioned this also. I'm like very soft to Merit Lake with this build, and part of the reason was because I kind of like evolved to this list um, during the initiative era, and I didn't run into too many lands players, so that's part of it. Uh, but yeah, I think I'm a little bit soft to Merit Lake. The problem with that though is like I don't really enjoy playing the Caracas in my sideboard per se. And then crop rotation, like typically speaking, you kind of need to play the crop rotation in conjunction with the Caracas because I found it to be kind of slow with Reclaimer. Sometimes it can get you there, but most times it's gonna be too slow. They just go for Turbo Merit Lage, right? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree. If you're not playing crop rotation, having Caracas come in tapped is a feels bad. I used to run two Elvish Reclaimer,
Mm-hmm.
and the come in tapped clause really balances that card out as fair as it is.
Uh huh.
I think that compare it to Knight is just outstanding balance. I think the card is very powerful without being absurd.
Uh huh.
However, I think that does subtract from the Caracas appeal in
Mm-hmm.
a deck with no other. Even if you're playing two crop rotations for Elvish Reclaimer, it doesn't do it for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if there's space in the side for. I think you used to run afoul was the
Yeah, so the run of foul is a card that I've run in the past, like maybe as like a one of or something. The issue with that card, and why I don't run it at the moment, there's a few, right? Number one, it's like extremely narrow. It's like typically only good against Delver and Merit Lage decks, right? Number two, even against Delver, ever since we moved to Snuff Out, right, from Assassin's Trophy. And the issue that comes up that I found with run afoul in that matchup is sometimes if you, t- I think you want either all unconditional removal or all conditional removal. What I mean by that is like I've gone to these board states and maybe it's overblown, but where a Delver player has like a Murktide Regent and either an Insectile Aberration or a Delirious Dragon's Rage Channeler. So they will allow something like a fatal push or a run of foul to resolve first, and then they'll just counter the snuff out. That's the issue that I've run into when I have some unconditional removal and the other half is conditional. If that makes sense.
Okay.
So that's the first. And my issue with Trophy and Baseju is against almost every Lance player I play against. I mean, I'm sure they're all like most of the Lance players I run into are quite good, and I think most of them will main phase Merit Lage activation. Yeah, do you think that's true or you don't think so?
I think against elves I would, unless I was holding something up. So
Mm-hmm.
most of the time I'm putting in Merit Lage. It's coming in off of a crop rotation. If I lay out face up Merit Lage on the table,
Mm-hmm.
I've got, or I guess I've got stage depths ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm waiting, I've got another play. If I don't have another play, then I'm going to jam.
Right.
So I think that you are correct in that.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got the ability to hold up 2 mana, I probably would wait a turn or two if I've got control of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm jamming Merit Lage, I'll do it depending on what your mana situation is.
Yeah, so I think that is like in line with what I believe, right? So like so for those who don't know, full disclosure, Tim has also, 5-0'd a few times with elves. So he's like well aware of like uh where the bottlenecks are with this deck and I guess any cradle deck, right? And I think for those who haven't played this deck, generally speaking, this is the tap out deck. So what I mean by that is like every turn you're trying to hold up mana, it gets exponentially worse because this is kind of like an exponential growth deck where because of the way the deck is like built around Guy's Cradle and I don't think we're allowed to like keep up 2 mana every turn just to play around Merit Lage, but uh, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I think that you are uh, on your Newton. You've made Newton elves. This is kind of your wheelhouse. I agree with
Mm-hmm.
you. I think having the tools like Quirion Ranger or Wirewood Symbiote,
Mm-hmm.
where you can, on your opponent's turn,
Mm-hmm.
untap and make 2 mana by having 2 creatures, gives you the flexibility to play a Boseiju or two. I think that that is a easier concession
Mm-hmm.
than trying to do it with the builds you have here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you are correct. I think that if you are running one of the older, more traditional combo elves or earlier states of reclaimer elves,
Uh-huh.
then you might be able to pull something like that off.
That's a good point and something I had not thought of. The one it's kind of ironic and good, I guess, that you mentioned the card because one card that I always flirt with the idea of playing again is the first Queer Ranger, and I think the ability to attack, especially now that I'm playing Ignoble Hierarch, it could be, I guess, a reasonable way to, you know, hold up, so to speak, Baseju slash Trophy. If I do decide to play like a one of or whatever. Notably, the Atraxa can find dig 15 or so ish deep, right, for the Baseju because not specifically for this matchup, but maybe for another matchup like Painter, for instance, because you're decent chance you're gonna see Once Upon a Time, right? Okay, so I got a message saying my volume is quite low. I'll try to raise that a little bit. One second. Hmm. Don't know why. Okay, so the levels are fine for Tim, and maybe that's okay. So maybe that could be you, gamer chat. Um, so what do you think overall, Tim? Like versus in the matchup, like, do you feel favored? Does it change if I'm on like the more combo-y version? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, I like the matchup for lands. I think that lands has the tools it needs to beat elves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, not anything absurd, but if you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to give it 10-15%, I'd say that's probably about right.
Mm-hmm.
The combo elves deck is a much higher margin in my mind. There's It's an easy blowout to crop rot for Glacial Chasm, and if they don't, they flooded the board with elves, and you just play out Tabernacle, and it's so much more punishing than
Mm-hmm.
the way that you've set your deck up. So I feel like this is you don't have some of the specialized tools that scare me the most,
Mm-hmm.
but the way that you've built this deck, it survives past the early turns and has the explosive threat potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, control setup with the combo finish is, pretty scary. Um, Opposition Agent is a card that I was really afraid of.
That makes it. It's funny too because it's the card that hoses all the other green decks. If that makes sense.
I think it's great. I don't know if uh, when I brought elves to a local table, I brought two of the opposition agents because I enjoyed the feeling of inverting the pain I've been inflicted onto other people, and it was, seeing it come down. I guess that was game one match or match one game two
Yes.
was was not that had closed it out because I had expedition map in play and at least one crop rotation in hand, and I was just like devastated. And I was like, okay, 3 drop. Is he getting another endurance? And then I was like, oh wait, I am not in a good position at. So I think that having the opposition agent hands, I would prioritize over the graveyard hate hands. If you've got, double graveyard hate or conditional graveyard hate and cling to dust or Gaia's, and then keep an opposition agent alongside of that, I think that
Mm.
will be a more powerful, higher win percentage kind of.
Yeah, I'm glad I actually brought this up with you then because like I had been on the fence about the agent in general, not necessarily in this matchup, but especially this, I think it's great obviously in this matchup. But I especially when initiative around was around, I felt like agent was kind of was slow, right? Because the metagame was forced to move to like fast combo because it's hard to play mid range against initiative. Um, but I'm glad I brought that up with you. Like, do you think there's any merit to playing more than one agent just because I can accelerate it out on turn two fairly consistently, or you think one is like good enough? I guess a follow up question too is the lack of enchantment removal is something that concerns some players. Do you think, especially in the lands matchup, do you think that is a big hole, or is that something that is not is overblown? Sorry,
I
two
would say
questions.
the first question of can you play two opposition agents? I definitely would. I hate losing to Doomsday. It is one of my more or poorer matchups,
Mm-hmm.
and with the metagame slowing down, the additional natural orders, just the rogue fetch lands from some of the decks. I mean, Painter lands Doomsday. I
Hmm.
think that, I mean, even Stoneforge Mystic, I would love to uh, bring in Opposition Agent. I think that I might like the card too much,
Hmm.
but I would definitely say two would be better than one. I,
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of that card.
Oh, I'm glad I asked you too because, like I said, I wasn't. I even went down to zero, like when initiative was pre-ban, obviously, because I felt like it was a little bit too slow. But I'm glad to have hear that input, and I'll definitely take that into consideration playing. I know, you might not want to hear that from a lands perspective. Opposition agent is obviously quite good against some of these reclaimer slash crop rotation slash green sun, anything green, right? Like really decks. But I'm glad to hear your feedback. What about the second question about like, do you think enchantment removal is necessary or not?
Uh, I don't think that it is required for your game plan. If you had artifact removal for something like Moxen, I guess Moxen get handled by Collector Roof, but
Mm-hmm.
I always bring in a Crucible of Worlds, and I think Crucible of Worlds poses a bigger threat than Exploration.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're removing my one mana enchantment, I've already gotten one additional land drop, and I'm okay with that. I'm never going to be happy. It's my favorite card, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, getting rid of six enchantments in my deck is not worth bringing in any enchantment removal for.
That makes sense. So you think, as at least from a lands perspective, like something like a force of vigor is not a big deal.
I would not bring it in. Um, I don't think that it is required.
Mm-hmm.
If you are bringing it, or if it's made a slot in your sideboard for other decks,
Mm-hmm.
then if Stompy gets big again and you need it to
Mm-hmm.
bust through Chalishes with Allosaurus Shepherds being, I guess you still have three. That's enough. Get through Chalice or whatever. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked before about how uh, Sneak and Show is a difficult matchup, and
Mm-hmm.
if you're not bringing in, or if you're not assigning sideboard slots to deal with the resolved show and tell, then I don't think that it deserves a spot for lands.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think before like I had talked to Jarvis, and he kind of likes I think Force of Vigor because you can hit Saga, you can hit what is it called? You can hit like Exploration, you can hit like Moxes, right? But like I guess it doesn't actually solve the long term plan, which is like typically speaking, if you have a loan, I don't think you care, right? Like most of the time.
Yeah, I don't mind if you're trying to force through aggressively. And
Mm-hmm.
when Jarvis and I play, we do talk about different strategies, and he definitely pushes Merit Lage into situations where I am too cowardly to push a Merit Lage.
Mm-hmm.
My opponent's got one white up. Well, of course they have Swords to Plowshares. I'm not going to do it.
Uh huh.
And that bluff, Jarvis and I differ. So if Jarvis is talking about a play style or aggressive slant where he's trying to push through a crater hoof or
Mm-hmm.
keep me off of resources to develop,
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely lost a bunch of games going Urza Saga, Mox Diamond, Sylvan Library, and
Mm-hmm.
then I see my land and my Mox disappear. I'm left on low resources, and you punish my life total, so I wouldn't be able to recover.
Right. Makes sense.
So he's got. Uh, I'm never going to say Jarvis is ever wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that his opinion is aligned with a more aggressive play style than I have. So I wouldn't want to bring it in because I'm not trying to get there or aggressively cut. I don't know how to say aggressively cut my opponent off of resources because that is what I do all the time. But
Right. No, no, I think I understand. Like it's more a of a kind of cheese play, so to speak, is how you see it. Is that accurate?
yes, I'm not. I don't have any lock pieces that would allow me to get ahead that you need to destroy.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that I've got, you can play around elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of exploration would be nice,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think that it's worth two cards.
Right, right, right. That makes sense. Okay, so that I'm glad I asked that question too because I think for me at least, within the people I talk to, a heavily contested card at the moment right now is like the Force of Vigor slot. Like, and especially now that I've personally gone down to zero Baseju, uh, I think since the printing of Atraxa, and especially when Initiative was around, I do think Zero Basaja was correct because I think having turn one snuff out was just too important when Initiative, when White Plume was legal, right? I think now that White Plume is no longer legal, I think you can probably play one Baseju because the printing of Atraxa means that you can actually dig for it as well, right? Like you know dig 10, and then you have if you one of the cards is a once, you really dig 15. But I personally don't think we need it, and it seems like you're in alignment with that because again, if I'm not playing it for show and tell, like you said, right? Why am I playing it? Let's just say for the lands matchup.
Yeah, I'm pretty good on that.
Speaking of show and tell, one card that is problematic that I've found is, and players have been leaving naked sneak attacks out against me. Now, obviously, there's like there's two ways I can you know deal with it, right? The first obviously is a Rex Sage type effect that can be found, and I think the best one in my opinion is Mass Vandal. Two mana is less than three, right? And then the other one is more interesting because I think it has more combo applications, which is the Phyrexian Revoker. Do you have any lean one way or another on those kind of cards?
I like the Mask Vandal over the Phyrexian Revoker.
Mm-hmm.
Phyrexian Revoker is a fine card,
Mm-hmm.
but the Mask Vandal being an elf, which kind of pushes towards this, and with the Fiend Artisan Natural Order build with Grist, I feel like the requisite clause to have a creature in the graveyard is
Mm-hmm.
easier to attain.
Gotcha. So the elf part I think is only relevant for the Allosaurus Shepherd, and I think by the time you can do that against a Sneak and Show player, you probably won. I think because they're stumbling. But I think being green to be found off a Green Sun Zenith, for instance, or um, and maybe the disenchant effect against other matches might be worth it. It just really depends if I value the Revoker hitting something like a Cavern Harpy or whatnot. You know what I mean?
Yes, I did not pick up on the Green Sun Zenith uh, searching for that, but not the yeah. No, being green is is huge.
Okay, cool. I think, yeah, I think that I'm glad to have asked you because that is something I've been thinking about because I have lost my fair share to a naked sneak attack, and I don't know if the one spot is worth it, but if it were, then it's something to think about, I guess. Did you have any questions for me, or actually, let me go ahead and bring up your list. I apologize for not doing this earlier, but I think Lands is one of the big winners. In my opinion, it's the biggest winner of the White Plume band. I'll let talk a little bit about your list. This is what Tim sent me DM wise on Twitter, but do you want to talk a little bit about like your selection of cards or like anything you want the audience to pay attention to or whatnot?
Sure. So the deck is very similar to the deck that I had toned in for the showcase challenge, and there's a couple of things that are odd sideboard wise. The Chandra Awakened Inferno always gets brought up. I do not like losing to four color decks that counter everything that I've ever done, and landing a 6 mana Planeswalker on turn 3 or 4 is a really good way to punish that. Um, Even if they bring in Hydroblast, that alt counteracts a lot of Uros. So coming in, the Chandra being the focus point of, I don't want to call it signature because Ali started doing it, and I
Mm-hmm.
copied it from him and fell in love with it. But then the Haywire Might is the newest edition. It did come out after that um, November, and that card has been fantastic. The exile effect for Haywire Might has just been so great. The big reason it's in the deck is I was running into a lot of the white or Max Torsion's White Plume Adventurer Stoneblade deck,
Hmm.
and Stoneblade getting Cauldron Complete instead of Batterskull is something that presented a new challenge because I could block a Batterskull all day with lands and for life at a time didn't bother me,
Hmm.
but the Cauldron Complete uh, you can't block with a Merit Lage effectively, so it's kind of disgusting. And Haywire Might answers that. It's tutorable up off of Saga, and then the 2 life has been relevant in a handful of games
Hmm.
where tutoring up Haywire Might off of Saga, connecting with Token, and then cracking it. It's just been spectacular. So
Hmm.
it's got play against a handful of other decks, and at worst, it's a 1 mana 1/1 gain 2 life.
Hmm.
So I've never been upset to see it.
Mm.
I am low on punishing fires with the 2 endurance in the deck. Even against Delver, the third punishing fire, I found unnecessary, or I was drawing it at the wrong time. I say
Hmm.
that as I did get my first punishing fire win in probably 3 years with a double punishing fire deck.
Hmm.
That used to be a much more common occurrence where you would punishing fire out your opponent. I did wind up doing it from an opponent on 22, so it's missing, but not missed. I guess it's not in there, but it's not missed.
Right.
And then the Torpor Orb is resilience for any of the people that still want to play initiative. And I really enjoyed that card against Doomsday. So Doomsday with 2 red Elemental Blast, Torpor Orb, and double endurance.
Hmm.
We do have some play around, and then of course the spheres for the degenerate combos.
Hmm. That all makes sense. I guess while we're on the topic, yeah, I do like this Torpor Orb, and I definitely when you showed me the list, I was like, oh, I really hope you didn't. I think normally my deck is not afraid of Torpor Orb, but I think out in the context against lands, it's probably a little bit better because the easiest way for me to beat lands is probably with Natural Order, and it definitely, you know, without Progenitus, it's a lot worse now, right? Like before, I could just get Progenitus and Orb doesn't really do anything, but I think it's significantly better with my build at least going towards Progenitus. I guess the most obvious question I'll ask, based on what you said, is um, if you were to cut the Punishing Fire and I guess the corresponding groves, what would you play instead? Because if it's not even that great against Delver, I wonder if it's needed, right?
I would be scared to go away from 2 because I've wanted them more against Teferis and Icefang Quaddles than I have Delver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but by the time I need it against an Icefang or a Teferi, I can go through and find it.
Mm-hmm.
But our red count is getting fairly low. There have been some, I think Ali calls it his Skittles list, where he goes a little bit harder and splashes blue, but I'm not necessarily there. I think that Slowgurk is just not fast enough,
Mm-hmm.
and the Punishing Fire has been spectacular. If Death and Taxes comes back at all, I'll probably add the third,
Mm-hmm.
but the the 2 Punishing Fire I think is still probably a tad bit risky. But
Mm-hmm.
the Haywire Might has come up in more situations for me that I've been doing it during testing in the initiative times.
Mm-hmm.
I wound up running a 65 card list with a handful of question cards of like, oh, what feels good, what feels good. And Haywire Might just felt good enough that I'm going to try and keep it in the list for now. I don't know if double endurance is still necessary, but double endurance, I guess, probably decreases the demand for having a punishing fire,
Uh-huh.
especially with Dragon's Rage Channeler being the new hotness. So
Okay, so that I guess all makes sense. I guess yeah. I guess if I'm trying to be an outsider here looking in. Is there any merit? Because I noticed, like you said, the red count is low, and maybe for a better mana base. Is there a chance to go to a different splash color. Oh, and I know Jarvis actually streamed today playing lands. Something he tried earlier was gamble. I don't know where you are land on that kind of card, but another thing that came to mind is instead of the punishing fire, what about like a because it can be found off crop rotation, something like a barbarian ring.
Barbering is a card that I would love to bring back. It lasted longer in my deck than it did some others, and I was still running it concurrent with a double Urza Saga.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, I was doing one Saga, one Field of the Dead, and one Barbering. And
Mm-hmm.
Barbering, if the first time somebody shoot, what is that card? The conspiracy card that you can't play one or two drops. You got to name a
Oh, Sanctum Prelate.
yes. The first time somebody hits me with Sanctum Prelate, I will bring it back in my deck. It's sitting in my binder, and it was, specifically for the Death and Taxes, Mother of Ruin, Sanctum Prelate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But I
you don't have to sell me on that. I know all about getting through Mother of Ruins with Cabal Pit.
no, but that would be great. The final week of, or I guess the last match I played, Ali had or pushed me over a list that he had where he had run, cut Sylvan Libraries, cut Endurance, bring back Mana Bond and Gamble, and
Mm-hmm.
I loved that. The nostalgia feeling of being able to turn one Mana Bond, dump a Merit Lage into play was great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Gamble might come back. I would have to cut down on some of my flex slots.
Mm-hmm.
So Shadow Spear, Expedition Map, maybe down a Saga, but that would be fun. I've got my original flooded gambles that I would definitely put back in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like Sylvan Library too much. I started running it side. I brought it in just about every matchup, so I started running it main.
Mm-hmm.
I put in two, and I just haven't been able to get away from it terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So if Sylvan Library, if there's a large influx in uh, Hull Breacher, Hull Breacher,
Yeah, Hull Breacher and Narset.
yeah, if there's a large influx in Hull Breacher, I would be definitely going away from Sylvan Library. And if I go away from Sylvan Library, then I'd want to bring back the gambles because Sylvan Library is the what allowed me to flex out the gambles with the
Makes sense.
format getting so powerful.
That makes sense. Is there any merit, pun not intended, but in running the third library, or I don't even know if it's been tested in this build, but a card that I have loved ever since it got printed, and I think at least every green deck and possibly every just creature deck, or a lot of creature decks should be playing. Definitely, if you're a green creature deck, is Once Upon a Time. Now, is that a card that can? I know your land count is at 34. The creature count is unfortunately non-existent, but I guess there's endurance and haywire might. But any insights into like a third library or possibly playing Once Upon a Time?
A third library. So the second library, without a loaded Life from the Loam graveyard,
Uh huh.
doesn't have any positive effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I get doubled libraries and have to shuffle it away
Uh huh.
a fair amount. So I don't know that I'd be able to pull in another library. If I've got fewer targets, if Urza Saga Hate comes in and I move away from the Saga package, that
Mm-hmm.
frees up Expedition Map, Pithing Needle, Shadow Sphere, and Haywire Might, because
Mm-hmm.
those are not good enough cards unless they're free.
Mm-hmm.
So, Haywire Might being a free creature is what
Mm-hmm.
makes it acceptable. And if I get rid of that, I could see bringing in something like Once Upon a Time, but it will very rarely be my first spell. And if I'm paying 2 mana, I'd rather have something more powerful because it's pay two and impulse that doesn't hit any of my engine cards
Mm-hmm.
is a little difficult to justify.
That all makes sense. So, quick comment from chat here about Thran Foundry instead of Soul Guide Lantern. I guess I'll go first, and then you can comment because at least as an outsider, I know Ali has played Thran Foundry. I have found that card from an outsider's perspective, at least, to be way too narrow. Personally, just to hit Doomsday, which is at the highest when I saw it was like probably 10% of the meta, but realistically speaking, usually it's like at 5% of the meta at most. And I know, and I say this as somebody who plays Gaia's Blessing for the Painter matchup. Uh, the difference though is Gaia's Blessing is you're essentially 8 times more likely to see it because you don't want to draw it, right? Compared to the opposite where you want to draw the. I guess you can tutor for it, but the Thran Foundry. Do you have any thoughts from the Lance perspective on Foundry versus Lantern?
I'm not big on the Thran Foundry. The Soul Guide Lantern has two modes on it that the Thran Foundry does not,
Mm-hmm.
and I use those almost as often. So Soul Guide comes in and exiles a card,
Right.
which is great against Uro, and I
Yes.
hate Uro. Uro is great at recouping the land advantage, which I am trying to strip, and it's great at gaining life above 20, which I also not a big fan of. And then the second thing that it does that I like is that it can be sacrificed to draw a card. So a lot of times somebody will try and rip Life from the Loam from my deck. And
Mm-hmm.
if you've got Soul Guide Lantern out, it is secret mode, save your Life from the Loam. If you're trying to draw through it, if you are building a grindy sideboard match and you need to peel an extra card, you've got that flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty good. And then the endurance putting the cards on the bottom of the deck, I have never used on myself in all of my games. I have maybe done it when I've got, a card. It is not something that comes up often. I'm never targeting myself with
Mm-hmm.
Thran Foundry. It is only for my opponents. And so much of the time, I want my opponent's stuff gone. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want them to be able to entomb it back out.
Right.
So being able to get rid of all of my opponent's cards, get rid of all my opponent's dredgers, all my opponent's graveyard against Delver, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want them to be able to get that. And against the Uro decks, um, any of the four color nonsense, that's a fair amount of resources. If I can exile 16 cards from their library, they've got maybe 3 casts of Uro. And with Caracas, that's enough to make sure that that's not how they're going to cross the finish line. They
Mm-hmm.
have to do it with a Planeswalker that isn't Teferi and or T3. And I think Soul Guide Lantern is better than Thran Foundry.
Yeah, I like I said, I've never played in my defense, Thran Foundry. It just from an outsider looking in, it just seemed a little bit odd. I have, however, played Soul Guide Lantern in not only this Cradle deck, but as a card in general, and I have liked the card a lot. Like for the reasons that you mentioned, like it can just randomly come in for a matchup that you otherwise don't have any cards for, and the cycling is highly relevant. And like you said, tagging a Euro on ETB is pretty big, or or hitting the random bauble in the Delver's graveyard is huge as well.
Yeah, no, that might be a little bit strong of a stance to take because I still do lose to Doomsday, and I mean that is a tough matchup.
Uh huh.
And one of the fun things that I've seen Ali do that I've ported over to Vintage is
Uh huh.
uh, running in. Uh, I am terrible with land names. The Ipnu Rivulet.
Yes,
Uh,
that is a card that I have also played. In It's funny too because we share some of the same cards, right? Because we're green and you're a crop rotation deck. I'm a like an Elvish Reclaimer, which is like crop rotation on legs. I have played that card actually before Endurance got printed as a, desperation. What's it called it? Haymaker against Doomsday, but it just like it was good when it worked. The problem is like how many times they're gonna play Doomsday, and again, you have to get to the point of the game where you actually can use it to, right? If it kill
Yeah,
you on turn one, doesn't matter.
yeah, making it past turn one is the trick. But I had that same problem with initiative where like my 2 mana Torpor Orb on turn one was
Hmm.
too slow. And I am so glad that we live in a world where that is no longer the case. I know that all the 4 mana ones are still out there, but
Uh-huh.
those are harder to argue against. But turn one White Plume was just, oh.
So
Ooh.
I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things I was gonna ask you leading into tonight's stream was I don't know if you've seen some of the lists from this weekend for the. Granted, they're regular challenges, but then and granted, some people are playing their pet decks and some stuff that they're working on. But one of the interesting decks that has been doing well is the red green initiative deck. Have you played against it? And if so, or even if you haven't, what are your thoughts for lands against that matchup? Because I know out from outside looking in, the white initiative matchup was just horrendous for lands because um, they had essentially 12 answers to your merit lage, right? But what about against this red green version? I have to imagine at least it's better.
Yes, I'm not sure if I played the same version that was in the challenge, but I did play a red green initiative deck, and then I played a couple of Naya decks that were Maverick, but they went all the way up into Primeval Titan.
Hmm.
So splitting those, the Primeval Titan deck, great for lands,
Hmm.
as long as you can get through Knight of the Reliquary, which is a problem card for lands, no matter what Shelly's built into.
Hmm.
And then the green red initiative deck, I'm not sure if they had a weaker stance, but I only have a sample size of one, and
Hmm.
it was not threatening.
So I take it you won the match, or is that accurate? Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Yeah, I played a red green initiative, and it was a um I got out ahead. I was able to develop my mana, and
Hmm.
they just struggled to get to their uh
The
four
top
drop.
end.
Their ramp there isn't Promox, it's Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor,
Hmm.
and I've got answers to Dryad Arbor.
Okay, so I think the list you may have played against is not the one that is like floating around, because
Okay.
the stock. I'll bring it up here real quick. One second. Um, it's along this line. So I know XJ Cloud went like won back to back 5-0s with it. Um, but let me bring it up. Here we go. So it's along these lines, and I think Tim in the chat is the Tim mentioned that this deck is weaker to Merit Lage. Granted, they could run deck gone post board, as an option, or Blood Moon for all intents and purposes, but it was closer to along these lines. Do you have any thoughts on playing this matchup from the lands perspective, or I understand that the list you ran played what had like Green Sun, for instance, but this is kind of I think what made it
Yeah.
popular.
So I did not run into this one. I ran into one that was, you know, a few dorks into the Undermouth Adventure was the one that I had seen. So if it, yeah, it could not have been this. Uh, this looks powerful. This looks like workshops in legacy kind of
Mm-hmm.
potential, being able to fairly reliably hit out that turn one Trinisphere, I
Mm-hmm.
think is going to steal a lot of matchups. But
Yeah, as an elf player, I do not want to see the fact that this is going to be consistently hit on turn one,
yeah,
especially
like
when
I
it's
don't.
on the draw, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. On the play against it though, I don't mind this.
Okay.
So this is going to feel like one of those play draw dependent. Right after War of the Spark, there was a deck similar that played the 8 Soul Lands, Karns, Keys, and uh, whatever the 2 mana taps for 4 is.
Two mana.
2 mana taps for 3, untaps for 4.
Oh, Grim Monolith.
Yes. And I think that this has got a lot of that deck design meta share space in my
Mm-hmm.
brain, where a lot of people are going to be playing Force of Will, and they're going to force the first threat and will be able to find a second force or develop underneath it afterwards. I mean, turn one Trinisphere is almost guaranteed, but turn one Minskamboo, I mean, this feels powerful, but I don't know how. I don't know if the reliability will keep it from becoming a mainstay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Makes sense.
I
Like, yeah, because you're probably gonna be mulliganing aggressively for that turn one, but if they have the force, then you have to hope, I guess, you have a follow up turn two, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and I mean, Fable's not a bad follow up turn two, and Licensed Hearst main deck as a 3 of is not great for me, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once I see that, my pivot's gonna happen, and more often than not, I'm going into a
Mirror Lage, right?
Merit Lage, or if I don't have the speed, I'm pulling out a Sylvan, and Sylvan Library into Unlicensed Hearst is a side I don't mind being on.
Mm-hmm.
So this looks fine. Fury doesn't scare me, and then the Caves of Chaos and Under Mountain Adventurer. I've got Maze of Iths, and
Mm-hmm.
there's no stopping that. So they'd need a third threat in order to get through. So this looks powerful, and I bet you I'll lose a fair amount of matches against it. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sold that this is white initiative power level.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think anybody's saying that. It's just obviously this is the new with Under Mountain Adventure just being printed. Not well, just I guess just being released is probably the better word on MTGO last week. It's seeing a bit amount of play at the new initiative, spiritual ancestor. I mean, successor. I guess right. Um, yeah, I guess though I was curious on your thoughts only because I guess yeah no um, white removal is definitely very good for you. Have you played against any of these Boros lists that have been trying to adapt or not yet?
I have not played against any white initiative decks since the banning. It has
Gotcha.
been so nice.
I am very happy to hear that. I think one thing that we talked about, and maybe it's not necessary anymore. Let me close this. Was playing a match after we had talked about what changes I would make if I wanted to hedge for lands. Uh, you know, if Lance is like really popular following the band. I know you're, back on the deck. I know you had taken a little bit of a break. And I know earlier you mentioned you're not super high on Force of Vigor per se against lands. Is there a card that you like outside of maybe like I don't know a Magus or something like that, or I guess for paper play, it's 4 mana, but there's Toxicrene as well. Is there a card that you are? It doesn't have to be a creature that you are kind of. Oh, I hope the Cradle deck isn't playing that.
Not really. After today, I'm probably going to be leaning against Collector Roof just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
The tools that you've got, I think, kind of line up. If I'm not afraid of Assassin's Trophy or Beseju
Mm-hmm.
or um,
Force of Vigor,
uh,
right?
yeah, Force of Vigor scares me a little bit, but I mean, it's to the point where my card advantage recoup rebuild engine is good enough that I don't really have that problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Yeah, Force of Vigor against lands is that definitely not Force of Vigor like against 8 cast, for instance, where they just like lose on the spot a lot of these times. And I'm glad that I asked you because I that was like something I've been thinking about. Uh, Out of something like this, is Magus even worth it? My guess is probably not because Agent kind of does the same thing and is on color, right?
Definitely. Agent is the same mana and shuts down a huge portion of my deck. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it takes off all my crop rots, it takes off my sagas, and it takes out my I mean, it's a blowout. If you get that on turn 3, turn 2, it's just absurd.
Hmm.
Being able to pull my Shadow Sphere would be just disgusting. I chump enough things with tiny constructs to stay alive through to a merit age, and once you gain that first life, then
Hmm.
I'm it's it would be terrible. I'm afraid of Shadow Spear sitting here looking Pithing Needle in the face is, it's opposition agent. I feel is a better tool than Magus.
Hmm.
If you've got other things that are red that are worth splashing for, I could understand, but black blending with Grist, Fiend Artisan, and the combo removal hate, I think that I like the shift from white to black, getting Thoughtseize instead of like the deafening silences from the past. That feels better to me.
Okay, I'm glad I asked that question. It sound because well, in this scenario, the Magus wouldn't be played with like Taito, for instance. It'd just be like a one of to Artisan for, and you can in a emergency cast off a hierarch. But it sounds like you almost like the second agent more than the more situational Magus, just because of mana dorks and consistency. Um, is that accurate? And I guess the follow up question also would be, is there a card that you would recommend for this list to either add or remove? I guess, right?
So you're right ahead on the first part. I've actually lost a couple of games to a late game grindy Plague Engineer against some of the Bosch and Roll style Dark Bant lists,
Uh huh.
where um, they put a Plague Artist or a Plague Engineer out on Construct, and I just can't make that. I can't get there.
Right.
So it's just worth throwing out there if you ever see somebody who's struggling or grindy.
Mm-hmm.
The Lair of the Hydra swap out for a Beseju, I think, does have some applications.
Mm-hmm.
The last list that um, I don't know. I'm not as big on fetch lands. I are we still? I guess are we still? Is this list still high on lands, or have we
Uh,
gone back down from initiative?
when you say high on lands, you're talking about land count or what in particular?
Correct. Overall land count. Do we have the flexibility to kill a fetch for a Beseju with Snuff Out being not as in demand with white being gone?
Oh, okay. I think I understand your question. Yes. So I actually get this question. I've gotten this question post ban where people have asked me, can we? So my friend Inigo loves himself a Beseju, and I told him, well, with the banning, like I told him before, you cannot play Beseju, especially since lands was kind of down to under a lot of pressure from initiative. But I told Inigo, my friend Runcor, that if he wanted to, he can play one Beseju going forward. I probably wouldn't play two only because you know Atrax can dig for it like in an emergency, I guess, or like under some of those weird games where people think they can, steal a game with like an ensnaring bridge, which ironically enough is handled by Hierarch now, but or along those lines, if that makes sense.
Yes, that all works for me, and I think that from the time I built, can we just shout out your Patreon and your? I mean, that was amazing. I think I had gotten a sneak preview of how you had built your sideboard guide, which is still here on my desk because it is
Uh-huh.
just beautiful. And that was what was the thing was I had, you pull up a list. So this is what I played this weekend, and I had, put a couple together. And then when I built it in paper, I was like, oh, what's the sideboard? And so I went and I subbed to your Patreon, and that sideboard map is phenomenal. And I think that the post-white initiative evolution has a higher land count than the original list, and I don't know, or the list that I came in under. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
anybody who is following who wants to play elves and loves Newton. This is money well spent.
Thank you. Wow, I don't think I could have done a promotion myself better than the endorsement you gave me. Um, I think I want to quickly just to clarify when Tim picked up the deck, the land count I think was at probably either 22 or even 21, because especially if you were playing the early artisan list, it was probably even at 21. But since then, I think the 22nd land was a no-brainer because in a fiend artisan list you don't mind flooding. And then the 23rd was at some point we've decided to play the Elvish Spirit Guide, like two copies. And then I decided, well, I don't think I like the variants of the Elvish Spirit Guides, but they were kind of instrumental in just like hitting land drops. So I even went up to 23. And the reason why I'm okay with, and some people have complained about flood, right? But the reason why I think 23 is the correct number is because of the layer of the Hydra essentially being insurance flood, right? Like if you flood, you can sink the mana into the layer, which has been quite good. It's like at its best against the graveyard decks because what you do is you hold a reclaimer the rest of the game, and then you just like you get Cradle, and then you get Arbor, and then you get Lair, and then next thing you know, Lair's attacking for like 7 a turn because you have Cradle mana, you have Hierarchs, right? So essentially,
Absolutely.
it really rewards that kind of play style of just leaving Reclaimer up as your force of will, right, against some of these graveyard decks.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely can see that. No, I went to build. I think you are definitely correct. I think I had two Fiend Artisan in the list that I started with, and
Mhm.
I wasn't sure that I was willing to get rid of uh, Glimpse, and I just after watching Julian for so long, I want that overture of 1812 every time I play. And but once I did the first time, it just felt great. I mean, the your innovations are in line with how I like to play the game. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. By the way, and shout out to Julian, and also thank you for the follow. But I thank you for the follow, GGG UI Zhao. I definitely think Julian got a lot of people and Reed as well playing elves, and I know especially if you're a purist so to speak or a traditionalist, some people don't like the changes that I've made to the deck because it's more interactive, less combo-y. But if you do like toolbox or at least tutoring and just like more interactive gameplay, then I do think this deck offers a lot for anybody who likes the grindy game, so to speak. And Fiend Artisan, while I think a lot of people see Fiend Artisan, they think, ooh, a creature that doesn't do anything on ETB uh, can't be, it must be too slow, right? I could not disagree more. It's one of those cards I think you have to play with. It puts enormous pressure on the opponent because more often than not, and I guess I'll ask your opinion on this. I feel like if you untap with Artisan, you probably are gonna win.
yes, the matchups where you weren't going to win anyway.
Right.
If you're, turn two artisan, okay. Oh, that's Storm. The Epic Storm. The uh, the Epic Storm is stolen a couple lunches because I'm like, oh, okay, blue fetch. Okay, blue fetch. Man, slow start from Delver. Oh, and I'm dead. And it's a pretty solid rebuild there. But I love Collector Oof in the main. The toolbox of being able to pull in Oof and Endurance is wonderful.
Yeah. I cannot say how many games Collector Oof has stolen me game one against like the Epic Storm, just because they were on the draw and like didn't have, a turn two kill, right? Let's just say I green sun for Oof, or sometimes they keep an even slower hand and then, it's a turn three with Artisan, right? It's tremendous pressure, like because the whatever you're tutoring for, even though it's card disadvantage technically, it's gonna win you the game.
So just had a thought on a card from olden times was
Uh-huh.
the Scoos. I used to see Scavenging Ooze in a lot of elf decks,
Uh-huh.
and with the evolution of endurance being more powerful, Scooz is just two. The additional life gain, the mana with the Fiend Artisan sinks. Are we too mana starved? Does the endurance in the main? I guess against Delver, endurance is just so good. Yeah,
So that's a great question, and one that I haven't got actually in quite some time, or maybe even ever. Nobody has really asked about Scoos, and I'm glad you brought this up. The going away from Scoos, and I realize I say this actually maybe with the wrong timing because an Elfless I think ran Ooze to the first place finish in yesterday's challenge, but the reason why we originally went away from Scoos even before Artisan was because and anybody who hates power creep is gonna this is gonna strike a chord with you, right? When Modern Horizons 2 hits and we saw Delver get powered up with Murktide Regent and Dragon Raises Channeler. The reason why Scoos just became, in my opinion, too slow in Legacy now is because the pressure that you are under Delver is created by them just playing a normal game, whereas the response from Ooze requires mana to be sunk into it, and I just didn't think it lined up very well against specifically Delver, Dragon's Rage Channeler, and Murktide Regent because they don't have to do additional steps to fight through an Ooze. They just play a normal game, so to speak. Whereas an Endurance just cleanly solves that without any additional mana investment, if that makes sense. Not to mention it's a
no,
3/4 upon entering.
yeah, no, that works, especially with or Darcy and Murktide. It's really easy to defend endurance. The targeted removal against lands was something that I used to struggle to play around, but it's been gone for long enough. I've completely forgotten it.
Yeah, are you talking about the ooze? There are times where I get to like 4 mana or something, and against a graveyard deck, and you can just get a ooze and just lock up a game, so to speak, because of instant speed activation. But essentially, what I think is better is just not to play that slot and hope Reclaimer untaps, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. The
Okay. Did you have? I think I don't know if it makes sense to play a third match, given that it seems like you definitely like I said, the opposition agent over the Magus, and you don't even the cards that I had in mind in particular for this matchup. It seems like you kind of are anti those cards in the sense that if I'm not playing for other matchups, it doesn't really make sense to play for the lands matchup. Did you have any more questions for me, or I'll go ahead and bring up your list again. Let me see if I have any questions for your lands list. Maybe the audience, or if the audience wants to ask, I can relay as well to you. I don't think you have you're looking at the Twitch channel at the moment, but while I'm bringing up your list, any questions you have for me? And it sounds like you're a fan of this card in general. This Cling to Dust.
Yeah, Cling to Dust feels good as your. I mean, you care about both creatures and um, lands being in your yard
Mm-hmm.
for your. I still think it's good. The incidental life gain, the card advantage, and then the targeted selection, I think really works for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that card's a winner.
Nice. Okay, so like I said, this is the first time I'm playing with this card because the logic was I just wanted a card that can come in similar to a Soul Guy Lancer, right? Any matchup, and then it's nice that it can maybe turn off a Delirious DRC, and then I think the other stuff is like pretty self-explanatory, like targeted discard for combo matchups, endurance, just very flexible disruption as well. A ley line just so I don't like lose the ley line of sanctity or something like that. But here is. Do you have any other questions for me before I bring up your list?
Uh, I don't. I think that what you do is innovative, and I'm glad that I kind of understand where you're coming from. I didn't see your list, which I think is kind of good going into the play a little bit on the blind.
Mm-hmm.
But having four snuff outs in the main should give me a better edge in game one.
Hmm.
So I like it, and everything was good. This was a lot of fun.
Okay. So before I bring up your list again, thank you, Mike, for the sub again. We'll go ahead and open a chest in honor of Mike. 15 months subscription, and thank you, Matt, for the raid. I know Matt, mentioned the Caracas earlier. For those who are joining in from Matt's um, channel here, we briefly discussed the Caracas, whether it was worth it for the lands matchup. I think Tim was. I explained my reasoning, and I think Tim is in agreement that while Caracas is an answer, finding it off Reclaimer is probably going to be too slow against some of the better lands hands, if that makes sense. But here is Tim's list. I think also, feel free to push back. Also, thank good night as well, Matt. Here's Tim's list, and if you have questions for me or questions for this list, we are wrapping up a little bit because I think we were gonna play a third match, but I think given that Tim doesn't feel like there needs to be any changes to the sideboard, I don't think that makes much sense. But yeah, did you anything in particular you want to highlight again for the audience joining us from Matt's? I think the Chandra's probably gonna get some people's attention here.
Yeah, so the Chandra is what a lot of people, point to as a card. Well, why not Minskin Boo? And I played a double Minskin Boo in the side for a little while, and it wasn't as powerful. The Chandra comes in against a lot of the four color control decks, where all I have to do is get to 6 mana and resolve a spell. And I know that sounds like a joke or like it's too much, but it's really not that hard. I actually did bring it in round one against you as my sideboard, and then after understanding the changes to the deck and my role, -3 on Chandra to deal 3 damage kills nothing I care about. So I did not make that mistake in match two. Um, some of the other ones was I used to run 4 red elemental blast slash pyroblasts,
Mhm.
2-2 split because split your fetches. But it was I dropped 2 of those for a double collector roof, and the thought there was I was losing to 8 cast a bunch,
Mm,
and collector roof is very good against 8 cast, and collector roof is also fair against a lot of the combo decks that we struggle with.
mm.
So if you go turn one collector roof off a Mox into a matchup like Tez, that's more powerful than a lot of the sphere effects because the sphere effects are not meltdown pulverizable, and they've got a plan or a more concrete plan for that.
Mhm.
And then Chalice of the Void again for the combos. Even if I can't hit a turn one sphere, if I can hit a Chalice on 0, the sideboard there really is. You can see how cured up I am for the combo decks, having 2 collector roof, Chalice, quad sphere, and torpor orb for Doomsday. Coming in the main deck, only 2 punishing fire right now. I did just recently flex out the third punishing fire for Haywire Might, and then I am not running a full 4 Urza Saga. The Haywire Might being fetchable from Urza Saga and being a definitive answer to uh, Cauldron Complete is the reason that it's made it into the main deck. And then against Curses, Stompy, combo, opposing lands, it has been an outstanding flex. It does have to be a non-creature artifact or enchantment, which for the most part is not a problem.
That makes sense
It,
because yeah, of the way this deck is built, being mostly strong against creatures, anyways.
yeah, and then main deck Shadow Sphere. It's the deck is not very innovative. It's mostly traditional.
I did you kind of touched a little bit on it, but I just realized you do have a Chalice of the Void in the sideboard, and I think given that you said you can struggle against the A cast matchup sometimes, that does make a lot of sense because I was just gonna say, was there a particular matchup you wanted that for? Is there any, this time it's pun intended, merit for a two Chalice of the Void and one Collective Oof, or can you describe your logic a little bit on the 2-1 split that you have in that direction?
Definitely. The collector oof adds to a clock and shuts down a little bit harder. Those decks, or 8 cast and Tez, or the Epic Storm,
Mm-hmm.
typically don't bring in as much creature removal or creature hate against lands. The stuff they do will also hit my artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 2 mana on turn one is still pretty easy for lands to hit. So Collector Oof coming in against Storm and being a clock is more important than being able to guaranteed hit it on turn one.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last part. What about on turn one?
Uh, Being able to hit a Collector or Oof on turn two is oft times better than being able to Chalice on zero.
Gotcha.
Um, Considering play draw implications,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm planning on winning both games two and three in order to take a match. And on game three, or possibly then in also game two, I will be on the draw,
Mm-hmm.
and Chalice on the draw is just not good enough.
That makes sense. And actually, I noticed if we're taking the whole 75 in its entirety, the fact that Force of Vigor is also some defensive, it is a defensive mechanism, granted, other situational. How much did that play into your decision to split the way you did with the Collector Oof and the Chalice, knowing that, technically speaking, Force of Vigor is turn zero hate as well? Did that matter or not really?
It doesn't, for me, Force of Vigor. If I am Force of Vigor, I want to cast on turn five to get rid of a Blood Moon to win the game. I am typically pitching a Life from the Loam to Force of Vigor
Mm-hmm.
because it's drawn me 6 cards and now pitches to Force of Vigor. It is not necessarily what I'm trying to do on turn one.
Mm-hmm. No, no. I mean, with respect to the combo matchups, right? Or the the matches where Collector Oof and Chalice are good, either the eight cast or and or Storm.
Gotcha. Not terribly for 8 cast. I bring in the majority of my sideboard. Anyway, it
Uh huh.
is a pretty tough matchup. I was lamenting over the matchup to my opponent who told me, "Oh, this matchup's unwinnable for me," and I was not having that same experience
Mm-hmm.
that he had, and I wound up landing a Chalice on zero, turn one sphere, turn two sphere, and I really felt bad about expressing my concerns over the matchup beforehand, given that turnout. Against the 8 cast, Force of Vigor comes in, but it is low on my priority. If I've got Force of Vigor as my only play, I
Mm-hmm.
would never pitch Collector to cast Force because Collector Roof is a much more powerful card in that matchup. Destroying 2 artifacts against 8 cast is typically too late. Um, they've got Baubles and Emeries to recoup the value, and I'm not putting a lot of stock in Force of Vigor. I'd rather have a Red Elemental Blast over that. So I think that in that matchup, I had cut the uh, actually I cut the Pyroblast because I've got uh, 2 beta rebs that, or flip that, I picked up, and I like that. So I'd rather play those two and 2 oofs, but the Force of Vigor did not resonate.
That makes sense. That makes sense. They're kind of like independent that happen to come in for the same matchups. Is what you're saying here? Is what I'm hearing. I think.
Definitely, yes.
I think another logical question would be I know, and I only bring this up because I know, like I said, I talk to Jarvis sometimes. He's like very high on the fourth dark depths. Are you? Do you have any thoughts on your depths and your saga split for us say? And I think the other interesting cards that I see that I don't maybe see as often is definitely the Horizon Canopy.
Yeah, so I'm definitely on the old dog school. For the longest time, I was playing one of Urza Saga because I was not sold on that card being powerful enough to play,
Hmm.
and I I get it now. I did decide to leave in a canopy and a sheltered thicket
Hmm.
over some of our other card options, and being able to cycle through and have the additional green count for the deck has been better for me in high level testing.
Hmm.
And then the dark depths, when I built the deck, I don't want to say I bought a tabernacle, but I could only afford three dark depths. I had trouble getting the fourth dark depths, and I played a couple of rounds where I had three, and it was so often a fourth dead draw
Hmm.
that the way that I was playing, and this is probably going to again contrast the difference between Jarvis's playstyle and mine, is
Hmm.
I like a turn two Merit Lage, but I would rather wasteland everything you've got and then Ghost Quarter your two basics instead. So the Jarvis style of make a two turn two Merit Lage would suggest that you should definitely have the fourth
Hmm.
um, Dark Depths, but I don't necessarily play it as aggressive, which is why Jarvis is the GP champion and I am not. But the Horizon Canopy and Sheltered Thicket allow me to cycle through and make it into the late game. So I am hedging off of early game and more towards late game, which is, I guess, possibly why my record against Sneak and Show or Show and Tell isn't as strong as possibly Jarvis's.
I mean, I think what you said, I think two things. I think one, our audience here, Tim is being very modest. For those who are tuning in from Matt's stream, Tim did win, the last showcase challenge of the 2022 year. I can even bring it up here again. I brought it up here earlier. So that's number one. And what's it called? So that was in, I guess, November 6th, right? That was number one. Number two, um, the thing that I guess makes me think that you enjoy the way I built elves as well is I definitely resonated, or it struck a chord with me when you said you don't like losing games where you draw multiple dark depths. Now, I'm of that same school of thought because I think I'm. That's why I played three once upon a time, right? Like instead of four. You don't. I don't really want to lose a game because I opened up with two once upon a time, and I suddenly have a impulse, which is not legacy playable in my opinion. That I have to cast mid game now. Like obviously it can happen. I can still draw two with three copies in my deck, but that is much less likely to happen. So I definitely think our way of playing our respective decks, and is probably in more alignment, and that's probably why I think Jarvis, is a big fan of the traditional elves build too, right? Like I think he likes the more aggressive, combo if you can build, so to speak. Although to be fair, I want to point out Jarvis did 5-0 with my list just 2 weeks ago, so there is that. But yeah, what do you think about? Do you think those thoughts are accurate, or do you want to elaborate maybe a little bit on that? Or
I definitely agree, and it's the same reason I've dropped down on sagas. I've got a couple of Lance players. Going into my first paper tournament, I was super nervous about playing lands, and actually, I had Jody Keith do a coaching session with me, and this was back in check pile. There it is.
mm-hmm.
And so he kind of walked me through. We played a couple of leagues, and every time I was scared of being edicted. And he said, "No, you just got to go for it. You just got to go for it." And every single time, I would go for it, and I'd get edicted. And um, my play style reflects the fear of having that occur.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I've dropped down on depths, and I've dropped down on sagas, and I would rather play, two sagas, two ghost quarters instead. But having the map, needle, shadow sphere, it is such a great base level plan to to develop into that the third saga is better than the second ghost quarter.
Mm-hmm.
But I play odd numbers of cards, two punishing fires, three dark depths. I guess stage and wasteland is kind of shows what I'm trying to do.
It does, and I think that's probably why, like you said, you enjoy the way that you're skeptical at first of the artisan couldn't let go of the glimpse, but I think that also is why you probably ended up liking the artisan build because it is much more defensive it's inherently more defensive. Is probably the best way I can explain, even though it's a proactive game plan. Um, and that makes a lot of sense because even in our match earlier, I had a natural order. I think uh, it was the first match, and I forget it was game one or probably game two, I think. And I could have went for a hoof, and I told the chat, the Twitch chat, if Tim, you already had used one crop rotation, and I was like, if he has another one here, I just get blown out like big time by a glacial chasm or whatnot, and I just went to for Atraxa instead to just reload, and I think that kind of uh, illustrates maybe why um, we've kind of built the decks that we do and kind of enjoy the way each other's deck building philosophy, so to speak, right? I think it's inherently more risk averse and more conservative, if that makes sense.
Yes, agreed. And for anybody who doubted you in chat, I did in fact in hand have the second crop rotation. So
Yeah, I mean, we did see it later in the match too. I think I
okay, okay.
and then I kind of assumed it wasn't a top deck, but yeah, I kind of like based on the way that the game was playing out, it felt like you had it, and I'm glad that you agreed with my decision to essentially reload with attraction instead of just going for the high, very volatile, more volatile line in the hoof line, right? If that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, so is there anybody in the Twitch chat that has any questions for myself or for Tim here before I let Tim go? Shout out to Tim who took the time to do this. He offered me this chance to play against him. You know, back in January when I was saying, if anybody wants to money match me or just play matches for stream. This was just for exhibition, and we ended up going 1-1 anyways. But I said I know Lance is not super popular at the time, but in the event of a ban, and I kept my word. I will hit you up, Tim, and here we are today with celebrating the return of Lance to the legacy metagame, right?
Absolutely. It is back and it does feel good. Anybody who's curious about lands, you should definitely try it out. It's wonderful and slots right into try it out in real events. Leagues are still a little bit heavy on combo,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, it is a very diverse and fun metagame out there currently.
Okay, so did you want to I don't know plug the any lands websites or Discord or whatnot here on the Twitch chat, or I think are we good to go tonight?
I think we're good to go tonight. There is a Legacy Lands and Depths. Um, oh gosh, yes. Let me. There is on the Legacy Lands website
Mm-hmm.
um, a bingo board
Mm.
and a challenge list. And if you are new to lands or picking up lands or, just trying to entertain yourself, that is an outstanding um, resource for. Give me 2 seconds if I can't
Yeah,
pull it up.
if you can find it and then just send it via a DM on Discord. I'll post it here on Twitch chat as well, for just for the audience. I'm sure any new lands players will appreciate that. I know technically I'm a cradle player, right? But I think anybody who's tuning in is probably interested in the Lance matchup at minimum, if not wants to learn the deck. So that would be probably pretty sweet for them. And then obviously here's my Patreon again for anybody you know who wants to learn the Cradle deck. But I plug it you know when I remember on stream. So I think definitely the Lance one is good. While Tim is pulling up the link, question from Lomer Boy here. Um, are you happy with the format? I feel like the bands were spot on. Um, my personal opinion was I would towards right before the bands, I felt like the deck was already in a good spot, but maybe the format as a whole wasn't. So like, what I mean by that is Initiative was probably of the top 10 meta decks the hardest matchup for Cradle, and um, but I felt like we were starting to turn the corner on that matchup. Like it didn't feel as hard as it was maybe like a month prior. Granted, with the changes to the deck, moving the snuff outs to the main, just playing the addition of Vendetta, um, I think definitely like helped turn that matchup a little bit around, closer to 50-50 instead of like before I would say like 40-60. Um, but I definitely like I see my lands players. Tim, for instance, posted a screenshot where he went like 0-16 or something against Initiative, and I just like that did not seem uh, and like it would be good for the format, so to speak, right? And then the other thing was there's just so much pressure I felt that the Initiative put on the format. Like the gameplay wasn't necessarily great gameplay in my opinion too. Like it felt like a lot of the games were determined on turn one or two, right? And I don't mind the bans. Whether I think White Plume is definitely the ban for Initiative. Uh, if you really want to get frisky, then you ban Ancient Tomb, but I don't think people would be happy about that either. For what it's worth, I think the Stompy players would probably riot. I think EI is definitely the correct band out of Delver because I think Niv Smooly Trunks 1, 2, 3 put it best when he said essentially it forces every control deck to be base blue red because iteration was the best card of engine. But yeah, Archon also like putting a lot of pressure on combo decks. The format felt very much Delver versus Initiative versus turn one combo, right? Because uh, a lot of the mid range decks had a hard time against Initiative specifically. Okay, I think. All right, Tim just sent me the link. I just saw it right now. Oh, sorry, he sent it 2 minutes ago, but I just saw it right now. Here's the Pendravale lands achievement sheet. For those who are curious. Tim, I still have you here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I just shot that over. The Pendrell Veil actually has a bunch of really good primers and articles, and Ali is just pumping out content. It's a lot of fun, but the lands achievement sheet is what I was most excited about. It is so much fun to go through, and it's these one of stories that you want to tell your friends that they get sick of hearing, and it's all the times like, oh, you did something to, and it's just I went through and there were like 4 or 5 that I hadn't done, and most of them were the whatever the log enchantment is, where you turn it into a land. But
Yeah, it's
I'm doing terrible.
this is pretty awesome to see. Actually, little tidbit. When I was preparing for one of so I qualified for the season two 2022 showcase qualifier. And as I was preparing for that matchup, at the time, Moonstompy I thought was the best deck in the format. No apologies to Delver, but their win rate was just through the roof at the time. This was roughly last summer, and I did not at the time had Artisan, so I did not solve that matchup yet. And I just was thinking, how do I beat this matchup? And I really considered playing one Dark Depths and using Force of Vigor to destroy Blood Moon to make a Mirror Lage. It actually worked out pretty well in my testing, but I chickened out and ended up not doing that. Um, Maybe I should have, but the other thing that was pretty funny was I would uh, what is it called? I can like Besage you a Blood Moon, right, and then get a Dark Depths as well. So I have done this personally as well, and so I'm still at the beginner stages of a land's what is it called, of learning lands, so to speak, right? That is something I have done. Granted, not at the lands context, but in the cradle context. And then here's my spreadsheet again. If you just want to know like how I sideboard map, I think Tim said it best. Like the best thing is probably uh, I think that's like one way you learn the matchup a lot is to do the exercise maybe yourself or just to check how I board because you have to think about the strategy. Um, I'm sure Tim does something similar probably for his lands for lands as well.
Yeah, it's not as well orchestrated as yours. I actually took it and modified your spreadsheet to make it fit both lands, and I actually took Eli's goblins into that same format. So I had three identical ones,
Mm.
all with your elf up top, but
Mm-hmm.
for the matchups that I was trying to just get a little bit more familiar with.
No, I'm glad it helped. I know, like Parker from the Shadow community did the same thing, right? And I'm glad. Like I can't take full credit. Like Inigo Runcore has helped me with this, the formatting and making it look nice. And even before that, I got the idea from Max Gilmore, who told me that, who's a local of mine, and told me that idea a couple years ago. I had never done a cyborg map prior to him suggesting it or seeing him do it. All right. With that said, any last comments, questions from anybody? Tim, yourself?
No, thank you very much for having me on. I'm glad I was able to redeem in match two after the disgrace of what you've put me through round one, and it was a pleasure to be on the show. I'm looking forward to hopefully meeting you again in paper for a one of the Laughing Dragon MXP events.
Tim's too kind. He went easy on me round one because he didn't want to embarrass me. As I said, this is historically one of the harder matchups for elves slash Cradle, right? I think I think Tim said it himself. He feels favored in the matchup, maybe less so in against my particular version, but historically speaking, I think it is definitely tough for elves. If there are no other questions from Twitch chat, I'll go ahead and raid the Portland paper. I think my boy Curran is probably doing commentary there right now, and you know, I would like to thank Tim once again for joining us tonight. Tim is, like I said, one of the, in my opinion, best. Oh, thank you for the subs. Lands player, arguably the best land player I know. Definitely in the top three for sure. Between him, Jarvis, and Ali. Okay, so as we wait for the raid, we're gonna go raid Portland Paper Magic.